This talk was given by Jim Darr on October 10, 2022. The topic is Releasing Breakthrough, Power of Words, at the Intercessors of the Trinity Tuesday Night Prayer Group.
I've been so excited about this night ever since Brian said that he would like me to talk tonight, and just been praying about what should that look like. And so you know this thing about God's never late, but he passes up a lot of opportunities to be early. So that's what it's felt like. So right up through this morning and this afternoon, just listening to him to hear what he wanted to say. And so I felt like he said to talk about tonight receiving and releasing, blessing and breakthrough through the power of your words. And that's the phrase he said. Come on, talk about receiving and releasing, blessing and breakthrough through the power of your words. And then he did kind of a funny little play on words. You know the word, he said, through the power of your words? And I thought that sounded kind of funny, Lord. Shouldn't they be your words? And then he said, well, look at the word your. He said, hidden in the word your is the word our. Right? It's Y-O-U-R. Hidden in there is O-U-R. So receiving blessing and breakthrough, he says, Jim, through the power of our words. So why is it that words are powerful? Can you finish this line for me? Sticks and stones can break my bones, but that's a lie. That's a lie from the pit of hell. I have to tell you, when I was a boy, my younger brother broke his arm on a rope swing, and my dad could go from 0 to really, really angry in about a heartbeat and a half. And so Tom comes running in, and he's shaking his arm, and it's in a left. It's got an S hook in it, and my dad turns to me and he said, Jim, run up to the garage and get a board. So I did that. I wanted to please my dad, and I ran up the garage, and he has a construction guy, so he had a whole loft full of boards, and there's little boards and big boards and great big boards. And if I figured, well, if a little board is good and a medium board will be better and a great big board, and I want to please my dad, so I grabbed the biggest 2x12, 15-foot long plank that I could drag down the sidewalk, and I appeared at the back door. Dad, I got the board. My dad screwed through the roof. He thought that was a really bad idea. But so the words that I heard then from my dad, I remember them to this day, and it's a lot more entertaining to tell you about it now than it was living through that. But on the other side of that, remember just before I went away to school, my dad spoke a blessing over me. And I'll never forget these words. He said, Jim, you just never give up. And I remember that all to this day, 60 years after he said that. There's power in our words. And they can release blessing, and they can release cursing. But you ever wonder, why should it be that our words would be so powerful? I think it goes back to God. You know, when God created all of creation, he didn't think it up, and he didn't whistle it up, and he didn't dance it up. What did God do? He spoke it. He used words. He spoke life. He said, he spoke light. Let there be light. He spoke us into existence by the power of his words. Now, guess what? Also in Genesis, he made Adam and Eve. And what did he say about Adam? He said, I have made you in my image and likeness. I have made you in my image and likeness. So if God's words are powerful and they're creative, and he's made us in his image and likeness, then how powerful are our words? And you know, we have so much power in this gift of free will, because we can speak cursing or we can speak blessing. You know, it says in Proverbs that life and death are in the power of the tongue. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. So we get to choose how to use our words, because we're made in his image and likeness. When we speak, those words have power. So think about this. I can speak blessing or cursing over myself, over my circumstances, over my relationships with people, or my relationship with God. Think about speaking blessing and cursing over myself. I remember growing up as a teenager, I was pretty unhappy with myself. And I don't know if you've ever gone through this thing of it just sounds like a harsh word, so I don't know how else to say it, this idea of self-loathing and self-accusation. So the more I spoke those words over myself, what do you think that resulted in? Yeah, life and death are in the power of the tongue. So those I was literally speaking cursing over myself. Didn't understand that at the time, but it pulled me into isolation, and it pulled me out of relationship with people, and out of relationship with myself, and out of relationship with God. But you heard Letty tonight. What did she say? She spoke blessing over herself, didn't she? She spoke that she was how did you say that? In the river of Shalom? Where are you, Letty Reese? There. How did you say that? That river of Shalom. That's brilliant. You spoke blessing over yourself. There's power in speaking blessing over yourself. I've been trying to lose weight. I've been speaking blessing over my belly. Come on, belly. It's working. So we can speak blessing and cursing over relationships. We can speak blessing and cursing over each other. And how strange it is that when I choose to speak blessing, I have this extraordinary experience that I am blessed. You had this experience of driving down the road and there's a really annoying driver in front of you. Where did and have you rehearsed all the kinds of things that you'd like to see happen to that driver? What about this? That driver who's going too slow or going too fast or did a dangerous maneuver. What if you spoke out, oh Lord, bless that little one. Watch over that little Lord. Something's going on. And they're distressed, they're upset, they're in trouble. Lord, send your angels. Guard and protect, preserve and watch over. How did you feel when you heard those words just now? Did that make you feel good? So much better than and the double. What about your relationship with God? You ever fussed with God? He didn't seem to do things the way you wanted him to do them. Didn't show up when you wanted him to show up, or he didn't show up the way I wanted him to show up. Sometimes between the promise God gives us and the palace that he's promised us. There's a process. So we've all had experiences where God moved instantly, right? We've also had experiences where God operated in a process. I remember, I've told you about my wonderful Australian Shepherd dog, Jolie. When she blew out her cranial cruciate ligament, this essentially what we would call her ACL. And I took her into this is 7 or 8 years ago, I took her into the doctor. And it would have been a really painful surgery for her, a long convalescence, so I said, the doctor happened to be Catholic, and he happened to be a believer. And I said, Dr. Giannotti. And I said, Dr. Giannotti, I've been. Do we need to do this surgery immediately? What if we took some time? And what if I prayed for her? And he was amazing. He said, yeah, you can do that. He said, Jim, give it a week and bring her back in a week. So for a week, I spoke blessing over her. Because think about this, with God's creation, with his sweet animals, they don't carry any baggage, do they? Right? You know, they would carry any sin. Okay, well, she peed in the house. Okay, but that's a training issue, not a doggy issue. So I prayed over Jolie for a week, morning, afternoon, evening, and I just let God speak. Just released his blessing over her. Saw her healed and whole and restored. Saw her running through the field. Just spoke that out over her. I took her back in a week. Doc did the x-ray on her knee. It was completely healed. God completely healed her. That's the power that is the power of the tongue. Now, this whole issue of speaking blessing and cursing is such a huge one, because depending on what we choose, we are aligning ourselves with two different camps. We're either aligning ourselves with the evil one when we speak cursing, or we align ourselves with the Lord when we choose to speak blessing. I love Peter in the scriptures, because Peter's like me, right? He's, open mouth, foot goes in, make room for the other one too. So, and then try and walk like that. So remember, Jesus says, who do the people say that I am? And they said, well, you're either John the Baptist or Elijah come back or one of the prophets. And then Jesus springs the question, right? He says, but who do you say that I am? Peter said, you are the Christ. You are the Son of the living God. And what did Jesus say? He didn't say, boy, you're sure smart, Peter. Ooh, what a clever boy you are. No. What he said was, Peter, well done. You listened to God, because what you just spoke, that wasn't human thinking. That was God speaking through you. You heard him speak through you. So, next verse, 2 verses later, Peter's on a roll, right? And he figures, I got that one right. I'm going for the big money. And so Jesus says, guys, I got some tough news to tell you. But the Son of Man has to suffer and die at the hands of man, and he's going to be crucified. And what does Peter do? He jumps right in there, right? Because he's got one in a row, right? He got that first one right, and so he says, Lord, that is not going to happen. As a matter of fact, I need to correct you on this, Jesus. How about that idea, correcting the Son of God? That's probably not the road you want to go down. But what did Jesus say? He said something that sounded really harsh. He said, get thee behind me, because you are not thinking as God thinks, you are thinking as human beings think. Do you realize what he's just said there? That a mind that is not sanctified, that is not focused on his rapport with God, the default state is demonic, right? He says, "Get behind me, Satan." You are not thinking as God thinks, but as human beings. And it's because of the fall. Because of the fall, our default state, and unless we seek after God, unless we receive the great gift he's given us, that's why, by the way, it's so easy to slip into a place of cursing. Now, I want to talk about this idea about process. Between the promise and the palace is the process. Because sometimes when I pray, it's not God that needs to be shifted. It's me. I need to be shifted. And probably the most poignant one that's still so vividly in my mind, maybe some of you I think maybe I've mentioned this before, but I have a housemaid in my home, and I rent out the finished garden level. And I'm making the same mistake Peter's making. I am convinced that it's my job to direct and correct, and I don't like the way the kitchen is not getting done, and I don't like the way, you name it. I had a laundry list, and let me tell you, I was right. I had a long list of all the ways I was right, and I had decided that I was going to sit this guy down, and I was going to read him the Riot Act, and I got the power of the tongue, and I'm going to let her rip. So have you ever been so irritated with another person that you are rehearsing the speeches? Oh, am I going to let this one rip? And have you ever had, I've just a general rule of life I've discovered, if I'm making speeches that I'm about to deliver to someone, I bet I'm on the wrong path. I bet that's not going to end well. So I'm practicing the speeches, and they're devastating. Oh man, when I let this rip, he's going to know he's right, he's wrong, and he's going to know I'm right, and he's going to have to crawl out of the room, and I'm going to win. So I'm practicing this. I'm in my head. And at the end of each speech, I feel terrible. I feel terrible. And finally, but all the issues I'm angry about are still there and getting worse and worse. And so finally, in just frustration, I remember coming to the Lord and saying, Lord, my speeches don't seem to be right, but I have to tell you, Lord, I have no idea how to talk to this man. Lord, please tell me, how do I talk to him? And there's this pregnant silence. There's about 1, 2, 3. Talk to him like he's my son. Oh, I tell you, I wept. I had been thinking of him as anything but a son. Right? I want to speak to you about your sonship. See, gals, you get to be sons of God, and us guys, we get to be the bride of Christ. So somehow it all seems to work out together. So this mandate, this calling on our life to speak blessing and not cursing, it's rooted in your identity, in our identity. Who does God say you are? He says, you are a beloved son. Who does God say you are? He says, you are my precious daughter. before Jesus came, the Jews had no concept of God as Father. He was creator. He was king. Blessed are you, O Lord God, King of the universe. Remember that's what the Jewish prayers start. Jesus had to come to reveal the Father as Father, to reveal God as Father. And guess what? The word Father only has meaning in the context of having kids, right? You can't be a father if you got no kids. That's the only way you can be a father. Beloved daughter, cherished son. We are rooted and grounded in that identity. We are no longer orphans, but we cry out to God, Abba, Daddy God. We have a spirit of adoption. That's who we are. And so because God lives in us, because he's claimed us, we get to speak with the power and the authority of the living God. This is a big deal. Do you ever wonder about, do you remember when Jesus was in the boat with the fellas? They're with the guys, right? They're going across the Sea of Galilee. Jesus is pooped. He's just fed the 5,000. He's recently got word that John the Baptist has been beheaded. He's tired. He's asleep in the boat. And this astounding storm comes up, right? And these are experienced fishermen who lived their lives on this great sea. And they are terrified. So this is no puny storm. This is the big deal. And they wake up the Son of God and they ask the Son of God, don't you care that we're perishing? That's kind of a funny question when you think about it. So Jesus said, oh, you of little faith. And what does he do? He speaks shalom. And the storm stops. Now think about this. Isn't having faith going to Jesus, asking him for help, and seeing him do something? So that's what the fellas did, right? What happened though? Jesus said, oh, ye of little faith. Could it be that these guys, like all the rest of us, are in training? That he's modeling the power that he wants us to have, the power of God living in us? Could it be? He said, by the way, don't you remember what just happened? The feeding of the 5,000. Remember we talked about, Jesus didn't throw the loaves and fishes up and yelled, Shazam! And a bunch of baskets and fish came down. No, do you remember what he did? He broke, if you can find this in the scriptures, he breaks off some in each of the disciples' hands, right? And there's only 7 loaves and 5 fish, so there's not a lot. He sends the disciples out into the crowd. Where does the miracle happen? At the hands of the disciples. They break off bread and there's still more. They give a half a fish and there's more fish left. The miracle happened at their hands. And so he's saying, remember that miracle. Remember God working through you. I'm training you up so that you can speak to the storm. I have a friend in ministry who the first time she put in flowers in her yard, huge hailstorm came back through and destroyed hundreds of dollars worth of plantings. Do you know what she does now every time a storm appears on the horizon? This is up in Golden. You know the big Colorado Mills destruction with the big hailstorm that took out everything in the vicinity? My friend is right in the middle of that. Do you know she stood up on her back deck and she saw the storm coming and she spoke to the storm and she commanded it to stay away from their property. She had no damage and she has not had a hailstorm damage since that first one. She learned that she could speak to the storm. You have the power of the living God living in you. You have decided to give your lives to Christ. Holy Spirit, receive. And that's one of the things I want to mention, that when it really is an issue of which camp that we're going to be in. All the witchcraft and sorcery and all that stuff, that's a desire for control, and I'm going to be God, and I'm going to have my way. Jesus' way is this way of astounding humility, where he says, of myself I can do nothing. And he empties himself out, and he says, I do only what I see the Father doing. I say only what I hear the Father saying. And then astounding miracles flow through him. You have that power to speak blessing, to speak cursing. But there's another step. The last step I want to talk about tonight is this. If we're going to speak blessing, what we're doing is speaking in agreement with God. We want to be in that place where he flows through us. There's this story about a pastor who had a convention. He had to walk through a red light district to get to a place where he was going to get dinner. His name is Sean Bowles. As he's walking through the red light district, he stops by two guys trying to prostitute a young girl. It's actually 16 years old, first time on the street. And he says, no, I'm not interested, but he said, can I speak with her? And they said, yes. And he walked up to her and he said, do you know what you want to do with your life? And, she's wide-eyed and scared. She says, no, not really. And he said, well, I believe in Jesus. And I believe God speaks to us. He speaks to me. And I believe he will speak to you. So he said, so by the way, the two guys are drawn into this. They can't wait to hear what's going to happen next. They're drawn in, and he says, close your eyes. And I want you to ask God, because I want you to know that you can hear from God. And he said, I want you to close your eyes and ask the Father, Father, what do you want me to do with my life? So she does that. She closes her eyes, and they spring open, and she's astounded. She says, I'm supposed to be a cook. I'm supposed to. And he says, well, do you know anything about cook? I said, no. She said, no, I don't know how to cook. But she heard that I'm supposed to be a cook. So he says to her, close your eyes again and ask God, what's the first step to take along this path you're calling? She closes. And they spring open. She said, I'm supposed to call my uncle in Idaho. It turns out her uncle, her mom's brother, is estranged from her mom because he believes in God. The mom does not. But guess what? He owns a diner in Idaho. Sean Bolt stays in touch with her. He helps her get up there. The uncle takes her in, teaches her how to run the diner. And you know what? Next year, she calls Sean and says, my uncle's setting me up in business, buying me a diner. The point is, you can hear from God.
Thank you for watching our video. Please pray for our ministry. If you feel moved to donate, please go to our website intercessorsofthetrinity.org. Look for the donate button or mailing address.